What do you hunger for most, Craig?
Try this one, Fletch. I'd like a whole lot of people at my elbow. The more, the merrier. The louder, the better. And I'd like Yankee Stadium right alongside. But I'd like them on my terms.
That's what I'm getting at. What are your terms?
I'd like to be the number one straw boss. I'd like to give the orders.
Uh-huh. I'll bet you would.
Hello, and welcome to the Twilight Pone, the internet's third most popular Twilight Zone podcast. My name is John. I'm joined by my co-host, Fred.
Hello.
How are you doing this week, Fred? Which is the same week that feels like we never stop recording these Twilight Zone podcasts lately.
This is like the fourth in the space of a week or so. It's weird because, like, I don't know when we're going to release this episode, so I don't know, like, what narrative thread to pick up. Like, should I talk about my jury duty or, like...
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Antiquarian book fair, like it's gonna come out like some sort of weird Tarantino fractured narrative spread out,
taking the podcast in new, exciting directions in our third year.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I'm fine. I was actually just listening to the sonorous sound of your voice because I downloaded the special edition of your movie with the commentary track.
Oh,
and I have to say, I think you and I have better chemistry as audio voiceover people than
audio
you.
Buddies.
Yeah, audio buds.
Yeah, I mean, Jason and I are good friends. I think we just, I don't know, we hadn't really done the prep work, and, you know, I think...
just say it. You and I are better audio buds. You and Jason may be more...
You and I have, 100 episodes under our belt. Exactly, I'm sure if you go back to One for the Angels, there was a lot of pauses and hemming and hawing and just us pointing out costuming.
Yeah, indeed. There's definitely quite an exhaustive reassessment of who is on screen at any given moment. Sorry, no, it's a good commentary. It's funny at times. Anyway,
I guess since we're plugging anyway, my movie's finally available online for anyone who's interested in checking out. It's you can go to For Serious Movie. That's the word for, not the number, but forseriousmovie.com.
Yeah, it's pretty good too, and the website that you've got set up is pretty impressive. I like the formatting of the page.
Yeah, that's the company. They kind of handle it all.
It was impressive how you coded it yourself, John. That was awesome.
I've been working. That's the reason it took a year to release.
Right, understood.
I finally felt confident in my coding skills.
Cool. All right, so what are we talking about this week, or today, I guess?
Right now, we will be discussing The Little People, a third season episode of the 93rd of the production run. It aired originally on March 30th, 1962.
The time is the space age. The place is a barren landscape of a rock-walled canyon that lies millions of miles from the planet Earth. The cast of characters, you've met them. William Fletcher, commander of the spaceship. His co-pilot, Peter Craig. The other characters who inhabit this place you may never see, but they're there, as these two gentlemen will soon find out, because they're about to partake in a little exploration into that gray shaded area in space and time that's known as the Twilight Zone.
That is
Fred, was that you picking?
Yeah. It sounds like a guy tuning up, and then the orchestra just goes, BOW!
Knocks him off his sorry ass.
It's like, hit me! The time, it's about half past the space age. I don't know. I dig that. So we like to do our own Sterling-style intros. We have no way of knowing who went first last week. So I'm just going to go first.
And we're bearing in mind that we're on, like, having to write, like, 5 of these in 3 days or something.
Unlike our chemistry on the podcast, it does not get better over time. All right, here we go. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And so it must follow that in the land of the tiny, the two-eyed man is king. Especially if that man, one Peter Craig, is also big. Craig, however, is not content with the role of king, and he files for a promotion to God. He gets the job, but will soon find that while the bennies are amazing, the hours suck, and it's hard to find a good work-life balance. I'm sorry, did I just say work-life balance? I meant to say work-death balance. I'm sorry, did I say work-death balance? I meant to say the Twilight Zone. I don't know.
All right, yeah.
I got through it, all right?
Yeah.
Only one take Charlie, they call me. All right, let's hear yours.
The setting, a barren wasteland in which a spaceship has recently touched down. The inhabitants, William Fletcher, a big, beefy, broad-shouldered, grand, great kind of man, and captain of the spaceship. And Peter Craig, the co-pilot of the ship, with all the attendant shame and embarrassment that the co-title brings. Put simply, he's a small man, a Lilliputian man, a shrimp of a man, a skinny little runt of a man, a pocket-sized parsnip of a man, a minuscule microscopic moppet of a man. One might even call him the king of the little people, if one were so in the Twilight Zone.
You know, it's occurring to me that I just don't have any more ideas for these things. Like, I know we kind of, like, make fun and preempt them being bad and stuff, but I just truly, I feel like I've tapped every possible way you could make fun of the way Rod Serling writes, and at this point it's just like, I don't know, puns, I guess.
Yeah, when you say, like, we like to write our own Serling-style intros,
true.
I feel like there needs to be an asterisk somewhere around episode 100 where it's like, this is what we do, and we're not sure about the bit anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Little behind-the-scenes look, my other idea was to take the Joan Osborne song, What If God Was One of Us, and rewrite it to... Yeah.
Would have been fun.
Yeah, would have been great. Anyway, this is a third season episode of the show, meaning it is available for your streaming pleasure on Netflix, Hulu. You probably find it on YouTube if you try, but definitely buy the DVDs and Blu-rays because they've all got great features on them, including the content of the plot, which is what we're about to spoil right now. So you've been warned. We open up on Tatooine, and two astronauts have crashed. And it's the same desert planet that, like, every episode of The Twilight Zone seems to be set on, where Corey's hanging out with Alicia, and those JoJo has landed, and everybody's there. But
was it filmed in the same, like, Death Valley area as those episodes?
I don't think it was the Death Valley set. They seemed too comfortable for that.
Yeah. They weren't angrily sweating in the very first scene.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. Sweat is applied dramatically later, but here at the beginning they're relatively clean. You quickly learn the dichotomy between the two of them. There's like one good astronaut and one bad astronaut.
When you're building the team, you kind of want that dichotomy.
Yeah, exactly. NASA always sends up a team. One of them is just a whiny little bee.
Good cop, bad cop actually derives from the space program.
Yeah, exactly.
Good astronaut, bad astronaut.
Did you notice how they made the bad astronaut, his name is Craig, the good one's name is Fletcher, but did you notice how they both have kind of like cravat-esque scarves, but the way that you could tell the bad astronaut was bad was his cravat was more visible? It's pretty much
I'm sure that's how we'll dictate things in the future.
Yeah, exactly. So the bad astronaut is really whiny, and he's just whining about a whole bunch of things. Maybe in the future there's just like 1 million astronaut pilots, but he's just like, he's so whiny. You know what I mean?
I just read in the last month or so this book called The Martian by Andy Weir. That's all, the protagonist is a NASA astronaut, more or less. I think NASA. He's gets stranded on Mars, and the whole book is him problem solving, like trying to problem solve his way out of it. Just like, this went wrong, here's what I'm going to do, I'll try and fix it. You know, lo and behold, it works, or blah, blah, blah. And like, it's like, I think that's kind of the personality you need in an astronaut. Like, kind of not going to get bogged down in, you know, pity parties. Just, what's the problem? How do I fix it? All right, let's keep moving. Not this guy.
Yeah, it's like, don't they give people like personality tests when they apply to be an astronaut? I get the feeling he's like the boss's nephew or something like that. It's like, the engine's broken. Like, he's just so whiny.
Maybe it's how, like, you know, W spent some time in the National Guard, like flying planes during Vietnam. Maybe it's some politician's kid.
He just kind of snuck through all the tests. He and the good astronaut have like a really Serling-y fight.
There may come a moment in time when I'll enjoy this.
Now, there may come a moment in time when you'll lick a rock as if it were a drumstick of a Thanksgiving turkey. But for the time being, buddy, you'll eat what is prescribed to eat. And if you've got any set of deep-rooted complaints, you put them down on a ledger someplace. Don't spray them all over me. It's a waste of effort. It's also dull, and it's tough to live with. You read me, Craig?
Loud and clear.
Then dwell on it.
It's like, no, I don't read you loud and clear. You want to unpack that for me?
It's very Serling angry dialogue, and the good cop Fletcher.
Yeah.
It's not like the actor's bad. He's just not designed for Serling dialogue. Well, he doesn't seem to be.
The weird thing about it is that, you realize how rare it is for people to have an angry expression on their face and hold it and talk that long. You know what I mean? Right. It's just too many words for someone who's angry,
It's hard for most people to be eloquent and angry,
It's hard for us to be eloquent and podcasting in a casual way. It's impossible.
Totally. So when your emotions run away with you, we scurry to the F-bombs. We don't suddenly say well, then dwell on it and keep it in your heart and wear it like a hat.
I know. It's like Oscar Wilde is pissed or something. I don't know. The good astronaut is, kind of putting the bad astronaut in his place because the good astronaut is the captain. There's a weird conversation where it's like they didn't even bother to come up with a way to sneak this in. The good captain is just so what's your motivation?
I've got that clip.
There are times when a man gets sick to death of being led around by the nose.
That's a big thing with you, isn't it, Craig?
What is?
Taking orders, being on the receiving end of a command. It's hard for you to live with, isn't it?
If I had my druthers, I might stick in a few changes.
Like what?
Say again?
I mean, beyond us getting out of here. Let's say this is the end of the line. Now, how would you sweeten the pot? A sirloin steak, a blonde, what?
Yeah, I think the intro kind of covers his answer, but it is super direct of just here's your character flaw. You don't like authority. What would you do to fix that situation, Craig? Bear in mind, I'm still really angry.
Just natural conversation. The kind of thing that comes up when you're stranded on a comet. I don't know. It's just not something you say. I feel like
it's the kind of conversation you could have after a couple months and everything's breaking down and you're really needling each other. But, they just landed.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever asked anyone, even a coworker, what's your motivation as a person? It's just, I don't know. Maybe I should have that conversation. I don't know. We should chalk back next week and see if I still have any relationships left. The bad astronaut basically is just I want power. And at that point, he hears a weird noise, which sounds a little bit like, I don't know, radio chatter or something. They think they hear people, but they let it pass. And then we get Serling's intro, which we've already heard. We know the planet has oxygen because he's smoking a cigarette. But I just like having him on a weird alien world. To me is cool in a way, cooler than having him come out from the bushes, because it's surreal in kind of a fun way, in a way that having him on Earth isn't. I don't know how you feel about that, but
normally he's on the set where the things are happening, unless it's the fourth season and he's in that limbo room.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I see your point.
It's heightened if it's an environment where
I guess I didn't notice because, the spacemen themselves aren't having to wear any breathing apparatus. If they were all in spacesuits and it turned over to Serling and he was just normal talking, then I guess I'd have some dissonance and realize that it was kind of cool.
I hear you, but I think just the fact that he's just wearing a business suit and smoking a cigarette, it's
they're in their track suits.
Yeah, and it's in the Real Martian, Will the Real Martian Please Stand Up? It's a really snowy day and they're all in coats and stuff like that, and Serling's just a badass smoking a cigarette in his shirt sleeves or whatever. Just something about him being apart from the reality of the world is very interesting to me. And it's heightened when it's it's on another planet. And when we get back from commercial, it looks kind of like Fletcher, the good astronaut, is building a primitive Tom Servo. Did you think that?
No,
it kind of looks like he's stacking a clear plastic gumball machine head on a little robot.
I gotta go back.
All right, well, listeners, take a look and let me know. It's maybe not an official hot or not, but I thought it worth pointing out. I mean, and they are stranded, so
Do you think that Craig looks kind of like a 50s rockabilly star, but really, really old?
Oh, you mean with his hair?
Yeah.
Yeah,
he's got kind of the rockabilly cut.
Yeah, he kind of looks a little bit like, who's that guy that Julia Roberts erroneously married briefly? Oh, Lyle Lovett.
No.
You don't think so? In the hair, at least? Like a curly pompadour?
I was thinking like when they would grease it all up and put it in the pompadour, like the actual 50s. Well, he has curly hair, but I don't think of it as like rockabilly styled. But I don't think these bits of banter are working at all.
Afield. All right, let's get back to it. And edit point here. And okay, the planet has 2 suns, which I thought I should just point out because every Twilight Zone episode that takes place on a foreign planet has that. Just want to throw that out.
You know how razor blades have that space race in the late 90s of like how many blades you can put on one? You think there was a little race like 2 planets? Well, my space world is super spacey. We got 3 planets or 3 suns here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I know. It's eventually
one guy just like burned everyone by jumping to 5 suns.
Yeah. I don't know. I get why they did it because they're like, whoa, but like they do it for every episode. That's like so it kind of loses the impact by the time we get to the 5th season. But
maybe it's kind of like how we used to have, when we wanted to signify the not too distant future, we had an African American president in the movie. Maybe that was just like the easy shorthand for not on Earth, 2 suns.
Yeah, that's true. So Craig, the bad astronaut, has been wandering off while Fletcher. What was I supposed to riff on your joke? It was too hard to do without being twitchy.
No, I thought bad astronaut sounded funny.
Oh.
I just got an idea for my new spec script.
Bad astronaut?
Bad astronaut. He's badass, but he's an astronaut.
Didn't even catch that. Nice. I get co-write credit executive producer.
I think I could sell that just on a title.
Nice.
That's great.
Okay. So Craig has been wandering around, and Fletcher suspects him of having discovered some water. He finds some like wet moss in his lunchbox, and that's like a real big tell.
No, I underrated you, mister. I knew you were a grousing malcontent, but I didn't know you were a cheat.
Man, he nailed him.
What's funny is that I realized every time I've watched it up until then, I had no idea what he was saying. I thought he was like, there was some kind of bird he was referencing, like a grousing...
a grouse-billed malcontent.
Yeah, it's kind of like what it sounded like. I was like, man, that's ridiculous. Sterling's really taking it too far. And now I'm like, oh, malcontent. I don't know. I just heard the word grouse and my brain stopped working, I guess. And they get out this microscope that looks like a telescope. I guess in the future, microscopes are bigger for some reason.
Yeah, it was very goofy and amusing.
It's just weird because it's like, in the future, this thing that's small is bigger. Like, shouldn't it go the other way? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, they use this micro telescope to look at these this moss, which turns out to be very tiny trees. Not only has Craig found these miniature trees, he breaks out the pièce de résistance, which is like a little micro machine that he found. It's like a little truck that's about the size of the refill for number 2 mechanical pencil. Fletcher, the good astronaut, is naturally curious, and Craig's going to show him where he got all the neat stuff. And Fletch uses the ridiculous microscope telescope to see a little miniature Burbank, it kind of looks like. He just like looks at a little stream in the ground, and it looks like the valley. I don't know. Where did you think they filmed that? Like, I was kind of trying to figure it out. I freeze framed it. I was trying to figure it out. But I couldn't.
Oh, I don't know. I thought maybe the Graham's book would explain, but
it doesn't, unfortunately. And he's been studying up on his miniature people, Rosetta Stone, because he's been able to communicate with them, in his words, using mathematics. I don't understand like how he could tell them what he's like, I can tell them what I want. Like, how? By like reading them the quadratic equation. Like, I don't get it.
I don't know. Isn't that a bit in the book Contact or something, though, that like when they're trying to communicate with aliens, they use as a base like mathematics because it's the same for everyone presumably, and then it like gives you a starting point of how to like at least acknowledge each other as intelligent beings.
I mean, I think and in the satellites that we've sent out into deep space, or the messages, there's like a sequence of prime numbers just like designed to indicate like, hey, we know about this.
We got it. Yeah. We figured that one out. We're good.
Yeah, but it's like there's a world of difference between like acknowledging that someone else exists and like, hey, I want a hamburger. You know what I mean? Like,
maybe he's communicating through like ASCII images or something.
True.
I don't know.
Maybe he's moved on to like emojis with them. So Craig, the badass astronaut, reveals that he's got some rather bizarre plans to kind of rule over this weird little race of tiny people.
All my life I wanted to sit in front of the wagon and hold the reins. Well, what do you think I've got here now? A whole race of little people who look up to me like a giant out of the sky. They're scared, Fletch, petrified, and so they do what they're told. Because this giant is like some avenging angel to them. Graduated, Fletcher, from a slob with a slide rule.
Yeah, I don't know. He bones himself there.
He seems to go to crazy gear very quickly. I mean, I don't know how I'd react if I found a race of tiny people and they started doing my bidding. I feel like I'd just be like mildly embarrassed and wouldn't really want to, friends
don't
came
go
over,
out of
I'd
your
just
way.
be like, oh, yeah, that's my little culture over there. They kind of worship me or whatever. Like, I don't know. He just really embraces the role super fast.
Well, that's why they had to set him up as like, it's funny because like I think that like when people do become, megalomaniacal, it's a bit of a slippery slope. Like I don't think anyone is just, born and they're like, I've always wanted to be Hitler. And like, someone's like, what motivates you in life? I'd like to rule like a people, and then they just suddenly get the chance and they take it. I think normally it's like more of a slippery slope. So you kind of feel like there's some steps missing in that progression. But maybe, time has been passing, so you never know.
It could be as long as 4 or 5 days. We just don't know.
True. It's totally justified, John. Anyway, the bad astronaut rather clumsily stomps on some little tiny houses, revealing that he is a vengeful and wrathful god, more of an Old Testament than a New Testament
kind of a
type of god.
Godzilla-y type god.
Yeah, kind of. I do really like the inconsistency of him stepping in certain places and that's bad and he's killing people, and Fletcher kind of wrestling him away and clearly destroying a few suburbs while he's at it, but being a little holier than thou about it.
Don't let the good be the enemy. What is it? The perfect be the enemy of the good.
True.
He's trying.
Yeah, exactly. In the next scene, looks like the rocket is starting to work again. Fletcher's got it propped up on the blocks in the garage, and it's humming like a purring like a kitten, but Craig is nowhere to be found. Fletch goes looking for him, and he finds a life-size statue of Craig. Now, based on scale of assuming, the aliens like a truck is... calculation.
It's as close as I got. I don't have a...
it takes time to make those, John. And you just rub them in my face. I don't do this for you when you read your bio. I'm just going to be as snide as a... All right. You'll find out, buddy. All right, anyway, the aliens are incredibly tiny, just smaller than ants, and this statue is as big as a huge...
Yeah, the structure, I thought about that too. I mean, it would be... I think significantly outside of our atmosphere if we as a people, were able to build something that tall.
Yeah, and it's like a hyper-realistic statue that's 7 miles tall that they built overnight. I don't know. And it's you could presume that they have technology that's mildly different from ours, I guess. But you feel like if they're able to enact that statue overnight, they're not going to be so stupid as to worship a guy named Craig. I don't know. But maybe that's just me.
Well, I actually thought that was something that could have been more interesting if it had been developed a bit more. The idea that you've got these tiny people and this idiot kind of becomes their god, but it's clear they're actually way, way more advanced than him. That would be kind of interesting. Yeah. But I mean, the episode didn't really get into that at all.
I feel like that's probably need a little more time than they got here. So Craig shows up and starts gloating about his awesome, stupid statue.
It's at this point that he's wearing a helmet, right?
Yes, yeah. It says Craig on it, too, in very cartoonish writing. Yeah,
the label and the helmet, they're not helping his god status.
No, but I like that.
He doesn't look like he's in god mode right now.
In god mode, nice. I liked it, though, because it makes him seem all the crazier. You know what I mean? It's totally. A crown, but it's clearly he's through the looking glass here. Mm-hmm. So Fletch, the good astronaut, lets him know that the ship is fixed and it's time to go, but Craig doesn't want to go, so he pulls a Reagan. Mm-hmm. And And
wait, what?
Oh, like a ray gun, but that sounded like Reagan. So
yeah, it sounded like. Did Ronald Reagan famously refuse to leave some planet?
yeah, that was what Iran-Contra was all about. Anyway, he doesn't want to go, so he pulls a ray gun. Craig fires a warning shot across the bow of Fletch, the sizable bow of Fletch, that ends up knocking the head off his own statue, which is deeply ironic. And then Fletch takes off, just lets Craig to rot.
He's all right with that, because it's the unveiling of a new age of Craig.
Yeah.
All right, my little friends. Comes now the new age. The age of Peter Craig.
APC.
Yes.
Or Anno Peter Craiginess. Craig has like a little bit of a godly maniacal laugh and, pulls the head of the statue that he knocked off with the laser gun and starts smashing stuff just to let him know what's up and rolling around like a crazy person.
Oh, my little friends, we've got a lot of plans to make. A lot of projects to work out. Much work. A whole lot of work. That's a reminder, little friend. There must be discipline here. Discipline above all.
Cool.
At the very end there, he throws the head or something and it hits the ground, and then you suddenly hear tiny sirens and the crowd being upset.
Yeah.
And it's so silly, and yet that's the one moment where I had a genuine pang of emotion, oh, leave the little people alone. That's sad. And I don't know. It just somehow that really resonated with me. The idea of a vengeful, wrathful God, and the poor people caught in the crosshairs of it all.
Well, it's
I thought it was
kind of like our own existence in a way.
Totally.
Yeah,
It was a silly moment that somehow I was like, man, yeah. Gosh, yeah, that's tough.
I kind of wish they hadn't had any of the sound effects in there at all, because I understand why they felt compelled to do it, but in a way I think it might have been cooler because A, it would have been less goofy, and B, it would have pounded home the point that he's kind of alone in this craziness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I do think it's affecting his. I actually think the bad astronaut's performance is pretty good. I know he loses his S a little bit quickly. But I do think he does a good job of, once we've accepted that the S has been lost, I think he does a good job of being kind of crazy, driven, drunk with power. The reign of Craig is not to be a long one, because in the middle of his little godly S fit, we hear a weird high-pitched sound, which is another ship going over that Craig erroneously predicts is going to pass by, but it doesn't. It lands. And we hear some crazy big footsteps, and then we see some
a little glass of water, and there's kind of a little, tremor in the glass of water.
Exactly.
And then you just see a lot of faces looking off in the camera.
But that's
very Spielbergian.
Not what I'm gonna do. Let's just quote Jurassic Park for the rest of the podcast. Tiny imperfections.
See, the thing is, Craig, he got the little people, and he didn't stop to think, what would happen if he was the god. He's packaging it. He's got to sell it. He's got to sell it.
But you know what? The little people found a way. Let's move on. It's a giant ship with people even bigger than Craig himself. Naturally, they're white men, of course, and one of them expresses some curiosity about the tiny little bug down there, of course, the bug being Craig. He reaches down to grab...
Well,
yep, we got a clip.
Before he reaches down, we get the money shot of this episode.
Oh, do we?
Don't you understand? I'm the God! I'm the God! Don't you understand? I'm the God!
And gods have to eat, Mr. Whipple. And you can't. Did he say God is dead in the middle of that? He's like, I am a god. So. God is dead. Or he didn't say that?
No, I don't think so.
Reading my Nietzsche into that.
Right.
Yeah, but he does die gruesomely, and we actually weirdly see his dead body crumpled up in the hand of the giant alien. I thought it was pretty gnarly. It was cool.
It was a little surprising.
Yeah. I think apparently, actually, just to jump to the trivia, they originally filmed it as just like a shadow closing in on him, and his death was implied, but they reshot it just to... I don't know. It's not explained why, but they reshot it to get that specifically in there. So, that was a very deliberate choice. Kind of interesting.
It was a weird mix because the, big people picking him up effect is done pretty cheaply of, I think you see a hand coming down and then just his face screaming.
Yeah.
And then, so, you never see... They don't try and make a contact, so... For a second, I'm like, oh, that was a little corny, the way they handled that. And then they show his, crumpled, bloodied body, and then they, chuck it in the dirt, and you hear it hit. And I was like, okay, Twilight Zone, calm down. Sorry, I questioned you.
Wipe the smirk right off your face. The aliens are kind of like, this planet sucks ass. And they leave. Right before Rod comes on, we get one final shot as he's talking, which is a bunch of, little tiny ropes attached to Craig's God statue, which I thought was a little too cute almost.
I thought it was great. A little reference to the Iraq War right at the end. Really putting your flag
down the statue of Craig Hussein. And we get Sterling's outro.
The case of navigator Peter Craig, a victim of a delusion. In this case, the dream dies a little harder than the man. A small exercise in space psychology that you can try on for size in the Twilight Zone.
Try on for size. You like that? Like that, guys? Try on for size. What do you
see
think,
where
guys?
I'm going with that one?
So what do you think happened to the society of the mini people after they... Do you think they entered a weird godless atheistic period?
Yeah, I'm guessing it was a lot like the 20s, 1920s.
Right,
post World War I. There was kind of an aimless feel to everything.
Yeah.
Lots of turtlenecks.
The lost decades.
Yeah. A lot of great literature is probably going to come out of it.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Not all bad.
There's a lot to talk about. I feel like one of the interesting things about it is how there's so many episodes of the Twilight Zone that are, based around, are aliens big? Are they small? I mean, and I understand why, because it's obviously a very easy way to get a sort of twist or a shock out of aliens.
Plus, it's a really cheap way to make aliens.
True.
You don't have to build any kind of makeup or anything. It's just they're tall.
Or they're
this
small.
one's small.
Yeah. No, it's true. But it's funny. It's they've really, not thinking about all the episodes that involve aliens in size, it's almost every possible permutation. You get the feeling that they got some sort of weird grid on a blackboard, and they're okay, if we made it the aliens are big, yeah, okay, we got that. What about if aliens are small, but they're even smaller aliens, and there's also got it, okay, check.
Right.
There's what if they're aliens that are small that are pretending to be big? That was the fear. Then we've got the invaders, which is kind of the reverse. Then we've got this one.
Yeah, we think they're small aliens, but it turns out it's us, and they're in a world of big aliens. Yeah, that's a nice twist.
They really just run it through the paces. Take that idea and twist it over.
I think other sci-fi writers just kind of shook their head behind closed doors at Serling, why is he so obsessed with the size thing? There's this whole world of science fiction. And he just keeps hammering.
Serling was not a tall man, it must be said. I mean,
that's true. Maybe it was an issue.
Weighed heavily on his mind. I was wondering whether you thought this was a comment on religion at all. I don't think it is, but it's kind of interesting and on some level of just the idea of, the Twilight Zone is fundamentally a Judeo-Christian show, I think, and it is pro-religion. It's not atheistic and existential, but I do think that this is kind of a wry comment on idolatry and religion on some level. Comments, your thoughts, John.
I think
Welcome
more
to Charlie
on the idea
Rose.
I think more on the idea of idolatry.
Yeah.
I don't think it's critical of a real organized, coherent religion per se, but just the idea of holding up certain figures. I mean, it becomes more of an overt political comment than religious comment at the very end with the pulling down the statue. But
it's more men who try to be gods, emperors who try to be gods.
Yeah, it has more of that vibe. I think there's totally room in the story, I'd say, to explore those kind of themes. This episode and this story just don't dwell on those. We never get to see the people or really understand where they're coming from other than what Craig says.
Yeah.
So we don't fully grasp, do they see him as an actual god? Do they understand he's just like a huge alien and they have to like appease him?
Yeah.
Are they living in fear of him? Are they actually worshiping him in some way? We don't really know.
Is he just like a dictator that they know they have to deal with? Yeah.
Right. If a mile high being came to Earth and like slammed down and started demanding things, if he said like, I'm God, start doing this stuff, there's probably a fair amount of people who would say, I guess that's it. But I think most people would just be like, no, that's some weird alien thing.
I think that's really an interesting thought, and it connects, I know this is probably obvious, but connects to Deep Space Nine.
Sure.
Because there's a race of people called the Bajorans, and they worship. Their religion is based around these beings called the Prophets, and it's proved that the Prophets are very real alien entities with specific motivations and goals. And so I often think when I watch that show, like, it's not really a religion if everything in it is demonstrably true. You know what I mean? Like, on some level, I think that it's a fundamental like aspect of religion.
I consider my workout routine a religion, Fred. And it all works.
True.
It works well.
True, and the results show. If you'd care to put up a picture of your physique on the Tumblr, we can show everybody what's what. But I do think that, like, on some level,
a-hole.
Hey, I mean, you're in decent shape, I guess. I haven't seen you in a while, but look, I'm no prince, all right.
Yeah.
I do think it's a really essential part of religion that there's like an unknown to it. Otherwise, it's just like you're just kind of following the rules. I think that people exploit that on some level, like kings historically have like tried to establish a connection to the divinity. Like, I think that's delving into some obscure trivia. I think that's actually why the color of monarchy is blue in so many countries, or at least in France and England, is because it establishes the connection between like the kings who live on Earth and then the color of the sky and then the gods who live above. It's like the connection between the divinity and the monarchy.
The episode like is a springboard for some of these discussions. I just don't think it bothers to get into them. But
you know what's interesting though is because this episode has been referenced in a couple of different places, very noticeably ironically on Futurama and The Simpsons, which is kind of weird because they're both made by Matt Groening. But there's an episode where Lisa kind of inadvertently creates a race of people in a petri dish, and then there's one where Bender is floating through space and a weird little society gets built up on his body, and both of them really do explore the concept of like what is a god and what is religion. They're not really about like someone being just megalomaniacal and
Do we say Serling kind of dropped the ball by
telling
such a straightforward like kind of one-dimensional character, putting him in this situation and having like a cool situation and not really doing much with it?
I mean, I think he does. It's interesting enough. I mean, I don't think it's like as deep as the deepest examination of these ideas, but I do think that like it's cool. It's interesting when you present someone with a chance to like have control over. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to diss the episode because I like it, but it is true that maybe like it's more insulting the episode for something that it's not. It's also not as good as Moby Dick, but that doesn't mean like it's bad. I don't know.
Guess I kept thinking while watching this episode, like, it's kind of stupid, but it's really fun. Like, I was enjoying it, but it's dumb.
You mean
like,
it's dumb because it's like so on the nose? It's like the guy's
super
like,
on the nose.
I want to rule over a race of people, and then a race of people appears.
Yeah, and then like the race of the people things, it's like handled goofily. The little sound effects are goofy. The like microscope, telescope to look at them are goofy. The fact that they like have built up a society pretty much identical to ours is goofy.
Well,
when he like
all we know is
steps
that
on tiny houses like Godzilla is goofy.
Yeah.
That they built a statue that's as tall as like it's goofy left and right, but it's like I was still entertained, and it's got I think it's kind of dumb, but it's enjoyable. Like I don't know, and I think it's like it's an episode that, given what's going on, it could have been, I think, way more thoughtful and maybe more menacing and weird, and I don't know. I think it could have been a lot deeper. It's not to say that might not have been a better episode, maybe it would have been boring or ponderous. This is definitely fun.
Yeah.
And it's like enjoyable. It's also, I think, kind of dumb.
Yeah, it is. It's a little dumb.
I don't know. Dumb might be a mean word for it. I don't know. It's just very superficial. Like it skates along the surface. Like I don't know.
Well, but I also think that like you're kind of like, we're coming at it and being like, yes, but does it really comment on the fundamental, issue
right.
centering
We're not
religion?
exactly taking it on its terms, but I'm saying on its terms, it's goofy.
What we doing next?
Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Yeah. Mark Scott, Zickery, Mark Grams Jr., Zickery and Grams, and IMDb.
The weapons in Giants uniforms were used in the movie Forbidden Planet. Big shock.
Prop number 7,426.
Yeah, there's an interesting discussion in The Twilight Zone Companion by Mark Scott Zickery about how the shot of the big aliens was kind of composited with a shot that was left over from I Shot an Arrow. I guess because they were having trouble figuring out how to convey the sense of scale properly, so they had like a random leftover shot that was like at the base of a mountain shooting straight up. And so that's kind of how they figured out. It was like, well, if they composite it in a way so that the huge mountain is like in the foreground and they're peering over it, then you can tell they're supposed to be big. Like if you just have a blank background behind them, it's not really clear how big they're supposed to be. So I don't know. It was interesting.
Yeah, right.
That's all my trivia.
Yeah, you need like a point of reference to understand that they're giant.
As base of comparison, check out like The Amazing Colossal Man or War of the Colossal Beast to see how it doesn't really work.
Yeah. Here's a random idea. Do you think the super giant aliens were humans and Fletcher and Craig were just another different kind of alien that was very small? No one specifically ever says we're humans.
I guess it's possible. I don't know if it matters.
All right, let's move on.
Well, no, I mean...
I agree. It's not that interesting. It just occurred to me.
Well, it's possible.
This is a podcast. I didn't stop to think, does this make sense or is interesting? I just said it.
Yeah. I guess that probably could shut down absolutely any conversation we have over the course of the last 2 years. Does it matter?
Let's just start every podcast
Let's just shutter it right now.
Okay, talk to you next week, John. Cool, later.
Nope, the podcast doesn't matter.
Okay. Apparently, the uniforms worn by Fletcher and Craig were also used by people in The Lonely, another episode of The Twilight Zone, the first season episode, so that's a nice little reuse. Apparently, they originally filmed two different giant spacemen, but they had to bring it back in for a reshoot, so there's only one of the same giant spaceman was reused. I don't know if that's interesting or not.
Yeah, I guess the other guy wasn't quite giant enough.
Where it counted, anyway.
It's getting late.
Yeah, I know. This is actually one of our latest of late-night episodes. The Twilight Bone. After dark. Nothing too much else interesting. Tell me about your bios, John, that you've worked hard to research. I bet they're great and interesting.
Joe Morose
fascinating. Wow. So glad you looked
Craig.
That up.
You probably remember him from Third from the Sun. Mike Ford played Spaceman 1 and Robert Eaton played Spaceman 2. They weren't in any other stuff. Written by Serling, directed by William Claxton. He did part of I Sing the Body Electric. He also directed The Jungle and The Last Flight. And that brings us to the
Inevitable.
MST3K.
John likes to find connections. Sorry.
I feel like I've just shielded up. Like, how can you attack me now that I'm, in one of your jingle bits?
True.
Do you feel like deeply conflicted now?
No, I'm fine. Was there no other bio stuff? Did you just?
Well, there's only two actors, and the other one's the MST3K connection.
All right, okay.
So.
Well, speaking of MST3 connections, they are connections between Mystery Science Theater 3000 and The Twilight Zone, as the name and context would imply. What do you got this week, John?
Claude Akins played William Fletcher, the good astronaut. He was also in the episode The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. And kind of Serling connection, he played General Aldo in Battle for the Planet of the Apes.
I thought he was a decent actor, actually. I know this. You said he had a hard time with the Serling dialogue, but I'm not sure anyone would have been able to knock that out of the park.
Oh, no.
Both the actors are pretty good.
I think he's a good actor. I just don't know if Serling dialogue and being angry mixed with...
I'm not sure. Yeah. It's hard to imagine.
Maybe the lines were just been impossible to pull off for anyone, but he just doesn't seem to have the persona. Like, I don't think of him as verbose, eloquent actor.
He's definitely
I think he could play gruff,
he's a slab facer,
hard-ass,
for sure.
taciturn. Yeah. He was in a number of acclaimed films, From Here to Eternity, The Defiant Ones, Rio Bravo. I really enjoyed this quote of his. Between the war movies I've been in and the heavies I've played, I've had about 1,000 dead behind me. I've been killed a good many times, but I took a lot of guys with me.
It's really weird. It's a very strange thing to say.
And he was also in the 3rd season episode of Mystery Science Theater, Master Ninja 1.
Oh, nice.
That brings us to IMDb ratings. IMDb gives this episode an 8.1, which is pretty good, pretty respectable.
Pretty respectable. Maybe not the top of the top, but thereabouts. Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head earlier when you said, like, it's kind of goofy, but it's just a lot of fun. We got pretty deep in our earlier discussion. I'm a little bit, like, nervous to tread back into those waters. I think it's just, it's very simple-minded, but I think that's okay. I mean, I think that, like, on its own terms, it's really fun. I think the two things that are just truly ridiculous are when the guy's like, so what's your motivation? And he's like, I've always wanted to rule over a race of tiny people, you know? And then lo and behold. And then the other thing that's a little bit ridiculous is just the little sounds, the little people going, like, I don't know. It's I don't know. That was a little ridiculous, but I don't know. It's a like kind of a 7+ type of episode for me.
Yeah, it feels very prototypical Twilight Zone. I mean, it's got not a lot of characters, not a lot of sets, a lot of Serling dialogue. It's got some clever bits here and there. I
like the twist, by the way. Did you enjoy the twist?
The twist is clever. Yeah. You know,
it's funny. No matter how many times you see that, it's all like. I just feel like that's just such a common thing. Like even in a very like bite-sized form, like there'll be like a monster chasing the good guys, and then a bigger monster eats the other monster. You know what I mean? That's like a very common thing. But it always, I don't know. It's a good.
It works.
It works. Yeah.
It's not shocking. It's not like it's a cookbook or anything. But it's like, it's clever. Okay, sure. And he's a bad guy. He needs his comeuppance.
Exactly.
That's as good a way as any. And I guess it's an interesting point. We didn't really talk about how Craig kind of destroys the little people out of this, egomaniacal, want to be a god.
Yeah.
Personal issues he's got. These guys just kind of pick him up and crush him, they're kind of accidental, but they're just like dismissive.
Yeah.
They're kind of a different view of the god, the kind of creator, detached, impersonal god, I guess. So
they're kind of like the zero are given god type of people.
It's well enough acted. I think it could have been written better, but I'm not saying I could have done it better. I just think whatever. It entertained me. I was smiling like the whole time. It's fun, it feels kind of like 7.
Yeah,
sure.
I don't know. For some reason, for me, it's a 7+. I'm hard pressed to justify exactly what the plus is, but I think the performances in particular, I really enjoyed them. I don't know. I thought they were fun.
Yeah. In my head, I'm like, this episode isn't that great, but like in my gut, I'm just having a good time. So sure, 7.
All right, the head and the gut find an average at a 7. That rounds it out for the little people. Thank you to the not so little people who requested it.
There was an issue with our spreadsheet. Blame Robbie.
We
can't quite.
Robbie.
I don't know. We don't quite recall who requested that, but it's on our request list, so we know it was requested. Thank you so much. Sorry that we can't say your name specifically.
Next week is a great unknown because we don't know when this episode will be released, but stay tuned to our Twitter, and our Tumblr to find out what the episode shall be. And John,
Yes.
what? How can people find those Twitters and those Tumblrs?
You could check out. Wait.
That was a weird setup. Sorry. How can people get in touch with us?
You can send us an email at twilightpwn@gmail.com. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at twilightpwn. You could check out our website, twilightpwn.tumblr.com. You can listen to us on Stitcher or TuneIn Radio or any kind of other podcast app or thing. I don't know.
That's late.
Whatever the kids are listening to. I'm sure we're on Instagram at some point. And you could subscribe to us on iTunes if you're over there. If you'd leave us a review, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, God, our Instagram account would be so boring. It would just be like
just endless, like, pictures of Ted DeCorsia.
I was thinking like shots of us just looking disheveled, like staring at a computer screen. But
right. Yeah, that would be pretty bad too.
Cool. So for the outro,
Fred, what motivates you?
Exactly. Well, a desire to I don't know, crack 1,000 Twitter followers? I don't know. To rule over the little people. To rule over our listenership with 100 iTunes reviews. We'll get there someday, John. Stick with me.
But there must be discipline, listeners. Discipline.
Don't know how we'll crush them. Even worse, Serling intros.
Right.
Practically a guarantee. All right, talk to you next week, John.
Later, Fred.